Hi, this is Pastor Barry with the supplement video for the discussion entitled Testing the King, Part 1. It covers chapters 11, verse 27 through 12:12. It's one of the few discipleship group studies that covers parts of two different chapters. And because of that, if you look in the resources section of the discipleship group's website, you'll find that you have a couple of options for ways to study this passage. One way is to do it the way that we've been doing it. You can download the individual chapters, chapter 11, which you should already have, I guess, and then chapter 12, and then just take the last page of chapter 11, the first page of chapter 12, and put them together. I think this is the option if you're using the personal reading guide, or if your group is using the personal reading guide. I think it's the easiest way to have all of chapter 11 and have all of chapter 12. For those of you who want to have the entire text on a single page, that option is also on the website. So feel free to download what works best for you and your group. I will remind you before we get into the study that next week is a missional activity week. And so if your group doesn't have a regular activity that you do, I would encourage you to email out this week and make sure that you take some time to discuss the missional activity this week so that you're ready to go for the next week. Okay, let's talk a little bit about this study written by Eric and Kim Porter. I did notice that we had a little bit of an editing error here that didn't get caught. Right under observation and interpretation, you should write in 11:27 through 33. That's what those first two sets of questions are for, is the end of chapter 11. So to put yourself in the religious leader's shoes, that's about the end of chapter 11. Okay, so just to kind of clear up any confusion that you might have there. Let's talk about that section. What is going on here at the end of chapter 11? Remember that Jesus has made quite a splash in Jerusalem. He has entered to a king's welcome, and he has gone to the temple and totally disrupted it. All of the worship that was happening there during this festival time, he has just put a big dent in all of it by turning over tables, by chasing people out of the temple, by keeping people from coming through. And so, not surprisingly, when he and his disciples come back to the temple, somebody's waiting for them. Chief priests, scribes, and elders who come to him to confront him and challenge him with this question: by what authority are you doing these things? Who gave you this authority to do them? And in a kind of an interesting move, Jesus answers their question with a question. He tells them that he'll answer their question if they answer his question. Now, is this just good debating technique, or is there something else that Jesus is after here? I think Jesus is, as he so often is, he is about the business of revealing their hearts. He asks this question to see if they can handle the true answer to their question. And so he asks, did the baptism of John come from heaven? That is, did John come from God? Or was it of human origin? Is John just another guy? Answer me. And they begin to argue with one another. Now, in their arguing with one another, their hearts are revealed, because you notice what they don't say. They don't even try to figure out where John the Baptist was from. They have no evidence that they're weighing, and they're not even really concerned about where John the Baptist came from. Instead, they're concerned about what the political implications will be of whatever answer they choose to give. So, if we say from heaven, he's going to say, why didn't you listen to him? And if we say that he's, from men, the crowd's going to get all upset because they think John's a prophet. And then, some bright guy says, hey, let's just tell him we don't know. Can't get in trouble for not knowing. So they come to Jesus and they say, we don't know. And Jesus says, I'm not telling you where my authority's from. It's not because their answer is not correct. It's because their answer reveals that their hearts are not ready. Their hearts are hard. They can't handle the truth. And when people can't handle the truth, we find all the way starting back in Mark chapter 4 that Jesus always goes to parables. Jesus says to you, to those who are on the inside, everything is explained, but to outsiders, things stay in parables. And so when Jesus wants to tell the truth, but he doesn't want it to be super accessible until people ask him, he'll put it in a parable. And that's exactly what he does in verse 12. And I'm sorry, in chapter 12, starting in verse 1, he says, then he began to speak to them in parables. When did he begin to speak to them in parables? When it was revealed that their hearts were hard, that they were not ready for the truth. And so he tells them a fairly simple story based on Isaiah chapter 5, verses 1 through 7. I highly recommend that you read the Isaiah passage. Partly, it gives you some background that the chief priests, scribes, and elders would have had when they're interpreting this story. Secondly, it helps you to interpret the story by giving you uh, pieces of how to interpret it. So the man that plants the vineyard in Isaiah 5 is revealed to be God, that sort of thing. So go ahead and read the Isaiah passage. I think it's worth noting that if you think about who these chief priests, scribes, and elders would most relate to in the story, it's very likely that they would relate to the landowner, the guy in charge. And so I think part of the way that Jesus turns the tables on them in this passage is they suddenly realize that they're the tenants and that Jesus is speaking this parable against them. So, in the story, this guy plants a vineyard, builds a fence around it, digs a wine press, builds a watchtower. So he, in the vineyard, he has sort of built in both the expectation of fruit, because there's a wine press, but also a fence around it and a watchtower. So he's provided for its protection. And then he leases it out to some tenants and goes to another country. So he is an absentee landlord, and it appears that the agreement is that they will live on the land and work it and enjoy the fruit of the land. But he will get his share. And so the next thing that happens in the story is that he begins sending slaves to come to collect his share. And the slaves are treated shamefully. They're beaten, they're insulted, they're killed, they're sent away empty-handed. Yeah. And then so finally, the landlord sends his beloved son, uh, the theory being that they will respect the son, but instead, the tenants do the exact opposite. They see the arrival of the son as an opportunity to take over the vineyard permanently. And so they kill him and they throw him out of the vineyard. And then Jesus says, what will the owner of the vineyard do? I want to stop there. Part of what Eric and Kim recommend, which is innovative and I think really fun for this study, is when you're doing this section of the text, to break your group up into two pieces. One team to look at the parable from the point of view of the owner, the other to look at the parable from the point of view of the tenants, and to talk through what you're thinking at each point in the story. And then you'll be able to come back together. I think that'll be fun. I think it'll be really instructive to get the feel for what people are thinking. I think especially because from the point of view of the tenants, I think that they see the landlord as weak, as largely powerless, and maybe as kind of clueless. So He's far away. They shamefully treat his servants, but he doesn't seem to do anything about it except to send more servants to get mistreated. And I think that they're becoming bolder and more filled with hubris as time goes on, because they start to think that they can get away with anything. So when the son shows up, they don't see it as a sort of an extension of the father that they would want to uh, honor him, but rather they see it as their chance to permanently take over the vineyard. And Kim and Eric have us read up to that point where Jesus says, "What will the owner of the vineyard do?" And I think part of what gets revealed as you talk about this in the two teams is, I think if the tenant group is honest, they're going to start to come to the conclusion that uh, they don't think this owner can do anything to them. That's why they think they can take over the vineyard. They can kill the son with impunity. What we find, though, in verse 9 and following is that turns out that the vineyard owner is not so impotent after all. He will come and destroy the tenants and give the vineyard to others. What has been going on here with this vineyard owner? What kind of guy is he? Turns out that he wasn't powerless. He was patient. He was giving them chances to repent. He was giving them chances to turn and to reestablish relationship with the vineyard owner and to do the right thing. And they just keep refusing to do it. They keep getting worse and worse until he decides that judgment is the only solution. Now, at the end of this section, Jesus quotes from Psalm 118, which is partly significant because that was the psalm that the crowd was quoting from in the beginning of chapter 11, all that Hosanna and Lord save us stuff. The welcoming of the coming King came from Psalm 118, and now Jesus is quoting it to them and warning them that the one that the builders are rejecting, the leaders are rejecting, ends up becoming the cornerstone, or some translations will say the head of the corner, the capstone, and he becomes. I mean, there's all these hints at the idea that there's going to be a new temple. This will get filled out later when Jesus actually pronounces judgment, the destruction of the physical temple. The story is elusive of the death of Jesus. There's all this sort of hidden truth in this parable, but it seems like what the chief priests, scribes, and elders are mostly getting is that he's speaking this parable against them. They may not understand the whole thing, but they know enough to know that he is pronouncing judgment. Now let's talk a little bit about application here. One warning that I want to give us is that I think Christians, when they read parables, they tend to associate themselves with the good guys, and they tend to associate other people with the bad guys. In this case, we have to ask ourselves if we are among the bad guys, if we are like the tenants whom God has entrusted stuff to, and we're not giving him the proper fruit of it. We have to ask ourselves, what is it that he's entrusted to us and how we're caring for it? What is the fruit that God expects and how we're responding to him? The porters also asked this question, what does it look like if Jesus is the cornerstone of our life? And in what way and why would we be tempted to reject that reality? Both excellent questions. Ensure that your group has time to talk about what these things mean and then to pray for one another. Transformation is the point of a discipleship group, right? We're discipling one another. Well, God bless you in your study of Mark, and I hope you'll have a great week with this study.